Welcome to the Education Insights Focus on Behavior podcast. We're here to talk about all things behavior in the world of education. We take the science of behavior and break it down for educators into easily implementable steps, and we're excited to spend some time with you. Get ready to talk through behavior, what works, what doesn't work, and how we can all improve our work in schools so we as educators can be more fulfilled and our students can be more successful.
I'm so glad to be here with you all today. I'm Dr. Selena Layden, and today with me I have my lovely co-host, Daniel Irwin. Hi, Daniel.
Hello.
How's it going today?
So far, so good. How are you?
I'm good. And Daria Lorio-Barsten. Hi, Daria.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here.
You doing okay today?
So far, so good.
So far, so good is the theme. And we also have our producer with us, Emily Muse. Hey, Emily.
Hello there.
And Emily may interject here and there, so we are happy to have everyone with us. So, Daniel, where are we starting today?
Well, we had a conversation last night through text that nobody understood my question, so we're going to do it again here, and it's going to make more sense. Who, in your humble opinion, is, I'm going to reword the question, the best fictional scientist portrayed in pop culture?
I'm sorry, Danielle.
I'm sorry. No, I'm not going to do that, Daria.
Sorry. No. You have to give the original question so that our answers actually make sense. And then you can rephrase the question. Go ahead, Danielle. What was the way you originally asked the question?
You could just say fictional or non-fictional.
You're right. I shouldn't. Okay. I initially asked who is the best pop culture scientist.
There we go. Thank you so much.
And we had 3 different interpretations of what that question meant. But the real question
Which then makes for good conversation.
But the real question really is, in your opinion, who is the best fictional or non-fictional science portrayed in pop culture? Is that fair? Is that a fair representation of the question?
That works. I think we'll get to the same. Yes.
The same ending. All right, Daria, you want to go first?
Oh, no, I want to go last because I need to hear the actual answers, and then we can circle back to me, to the person who operationally defined what a scientist in pop culture in a vastly different way from the other behavior analysts in the group.
All right, well, I'll go first, but I have several. But the best one that we all have to agree on is Doc Brown from
You're
Back to the
100%
Future.
right.
That is the number one answer.
Stand behind that. We're in agreement.
Okay, we're done. Episode
That's
over.
it.
We're done.
This has been our podcast. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thanks for
Okay,
joining.
but did you come up with other answers?
I did.
Okay, what's your other answers?
Indiana Jones
I had that one.
is one
That was on my list.
that I thought was really good, and I
We
didn't.
had an argument in my family whether he was a scientist or not, but I'm like, no, he definitely he counts.
And the
He's a
other one
doctor.
was, and I think it's
Be a
relevant to
doctor
our
and not be a
field.
scientist.
Listen, I feel like if you earn your doctorate, you are a scientist of some way, shape, or form.
Well, so my family brought up Doctor Strange, and I argued that he is a medical doctor. He's not really a scientist, but then he's also like the mystical arts, so that's a different thing. We didn't come to an agreement on that one.
I feel like doctors do have to be scientists. I mean, I'd like to believe that people who practice medicine, on me at least, are definitely scientists in their own right. So, but we cut Daniel off. Daniel, I'm
sorry, Daniel.
You started there.
One, I think you're right. I think if you're a medical doctor, you're definitely a scientist, and I am your subject. And I hope you're making informed decisions and working through a process. Anyway, we'll get to that. The other one I had, one is just really funny. It's Wayne Szalinski from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
We didn't think of that
because
one.
He makes me laugh. But relevant to our field and the work we do, and it also sparked the conversation in my own head. I didn't talk to anybody about it. And I also didn't know her name, but Dr. Louise Banks from Arrival, where the pods come down from Earth and she learns to communicate with the aliens.
I haven't seen this.
Okay, now you got to watch it. It's really
Right.
good. It's
To-do
really good.
list.
She's a linguist. And I was like, is linguistics a science? It is.
Yes.
I didn't fully understand. It definitely is. And so that one's on my list too.
Okay.
It's a good movie.
Those are strong choices. So I will be very transparent and share my first answer because when we originally talked about this, I really assumed we meant like actual scientists who are popular in pop culture, right? Who are like easily accessible. I was thinking along the lines of like Bill Nye. Most people are familiar with them. And where I landed with this, and I understand this might be a semi-controversial experience, but I am here for any of the verbal sparring you all want to bring on, is Snoop Dogg. I stand by that chance. If you have not seen the man narrate Animal Planet or any of the nature shows, you're missing out. And in fact, I might argue you may want to go do that, like pause this podcast, go do that, and then come back to this conversation because I appreciate hearing the narration and interpretation from Snoop Dogg himself about how Animal Planet works. So that was my very solid choice, and I very strongly feel about it.
So I am going to put out that he may not write all his own. I have not seen this, but he may not be the one who writes all his own material. Just to put that out there.
He probably has a scientist on staff.
Also, I'm a little concerned if he's like a good representation of a scientist. That concerns me a little bit.
Again, keep in mind the way I interpreted the question. That's one. Two, I am fairly sure you are going to believe that he does write his own material as he narrates the nature shows. So I would suggest perhaps you watch those first for entertainment purposes only.
Okay.
But I do appreciate, and here's what I will say. So all joking aside, and I understand you might be questioning my choice here. However, here's what I think. I think that he is able to bridge the gap from something that can be really scientific and may not be of an interest to many other people. And by infusing his with humor, commentary, impressions, uncensored, unfiltered reactions, I think he really helps people access more science than they ever thought, potentially. So there's my answer.
Well, controversial opinions with Daria, for sure.
There we go. There you go.
All right. Are you ready for my list? Like I said, we brainstormed this as a family last night. I am not endorsing any of these. This is just the list that we came up with. Some of these are good. So my kids came up with Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler from Jurassic Park. I was like, that's pretty good.
Don't forget Henry Wu.
So he came up because my youngest was like, the guy that has the mosquito and the amber. I'm like,
Yeah.
he's not the scientist though. And then we had to talk about
Who is he then?
He's the money. The grandpa. I can't remember his name right now. Like he's not a scientist. It's Henry Wu that's the scientist. He
That's what I
hires.
said. Don't forget Henry Wu.
Yeah, no. I know, but the grandfather. What's his
Yeah,
name?
grandpa.
The guy who's the grandpa. He carries around like the walking stick with the amber with the mosquito. So that's who my kid was talking
That's
about.
who they
I
were
had
talking
to
about. Got it.
like
Got it.
explain to him he's not the scientist, he's the money. And then the scientist is these other people. So we came up with that one. Bruce Banner, aka Hulk. We agreed every Spider-Man villain, except not really, because we did come up with some exceptions, but mostly every Spider-Man villain. Spock. Q from James Bond. We took a deep dive into this, by the way. Dr. Frankenstein. Sam Beckett from Quantum Leap.
Oh,
Loved that show.
that I wish.
He had like 8 PhDs.
Yeah. Good show.
Dr. Frankenstein. This one is my favorite. Beaker from the Muppets.
Man.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Oh, don't argue. He's cute.
He's cute. But is Beaker the scientist, though?
I don't know, but we
They're
decided
both scientists, Beaker and Bunsen.
they both wear the coats.
Yeah,
And
they're
Bunsen
both
make
scientists.
you a scientist.
Is Beaker an assistant scientist?
All right, Emily, you get on the fact check for this
Is
one.
Beaker the GA
This is-
for Bunsen?
This is what we
To find out. Because yes, I love Beaker, love the Muppets with all my heart.
Bunsen. I couldn't remember the other one's name, but you're right, it is Bunsen. Beaker and Bunsen.
I would not let Beaker practice medicine on me. Just saying.
I'm not suggesting that these are all good scientists. In fact, I'm going to get into a couple of not good ones. The Flash, Hank Pym from Ant-Man, and then we came up with two kind of controversial ones. One is Rick Sanchez, if you know who that is. You totally know who
I
that
do
is.
not.
Rick and Morty.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I
You
got
totally
that.
know who this is. And then this was my husband's favorite one, Walter White from
Yeah,
Breaking
Walter
Bad.
White was on my list also. I can't believe I missed Beaker, though.
I can't believe your kids did not come up with Phineas and Ferb.
No, that one didn't come up. Although I am surprised that they didn't, to be honest, because yeah, we have watched that.
Because I feel like that's another strong representation along Beaker lines.
Did we miss any others? Did you all come up with any others? I'm sure there are others we didn't come up with,
There
but
definitely are. Doc Brown was definitely at the top of my list, though.
oh, he was definitely my number one. There was no
Yep.
count, no doubt about that. So to our listeners, if we missed like a really big one, please let us know because I'm sure that we did miss one, but I thought this was a pretty good list.
It's a good list.
And once we all understood the question, I think we came
I-
to a good understanding.
I'd love hearing other people's perspectives, though, of what I thought was a reasonable question.
Listen, it was a great question because think about all the conversation and all the thinking it actually generated. So
Exactly.
well done, Daniel, with
Thank you
your
so much. That was intentional.
It was the plan.
semi-clear
It was the plan
question.
all along. It actually ties really well into what we're talking about today, which is the title of today's episode is Unpacking the Science of Behavior or Science of Behavior Unlocked. So we start out with talking about the science of behavior, which I think sounds really formal and really potentially intimidating, but it's not. And I think it's great that our behavior is rooted in science and it's not just something that I made up or Daniel made up, Daria, Emily. We don't wave a magic wand. And so what are we actually talking about though? What does the science of behavior mean?
Well, I think we have to start with science, right? Like, what is science? And typically, science is done by scientists and studies science. And so there's a couple of things I think we have to keep in mind as we think about science and we think about the science of behavior. And one of those is it's a methodological approach to things, right? It's really thinking about asking questions and expanding a body of knowledge and using a body of knowledge to help us understand and think critically about the things that are happening around us. So,
Daniel, you would totally fail fourth grade. You can't use the word in the definition.
I will continue.
Yes, you could, Daniel. You can.
Start counting. Start counting.
Science is the way scientists do sciencey things.
All right, keep going. We're going to get there.
Count them. Science is based on things that we can observe, right? And this is critical for thinking about the science of behavior, because there's lots of ways to think about behavior, and some of them are scientific and some of them are not. But
Okay,
it's also
pause.
something.
What makes something scientific?
Well, one, I'm going to start with one. It's objective, right? Like it's something that we can, I've already said observe, but it's something we can observe, we can measure, we can get reasonable inter-rater agreement. Did I explain that enough?
I'm assuming we're looking for that we are able to do a hypothesis and we are able like to test it, right? And that we're able to see if it works or if it doesn't. And I do think that like observable, measurable behavior, all of those things tie into it.
I think what you said, Dario, though, the testability piece, right? Like we really are trying to objectively define something, change something, and then see if that contributes to a change in behavior or a change in whatever it is we're trying to measure. And then if that happens, great, we can verify or we can unverify that it has an effect.
Well,
Go
and
ahead.
I think there's some other pieces to this, right? Like science isn't just something that we come up with today. It's something that's built on what we already know, right? And I mean, the word hypothesis means an educated guess, right? It's not just we pulled something out of the air and let's see what happens, which that can happen, but science is better when we say we have a body of knowledge and we're going to build on that. And based on this body of knowledge, this is what I think is the best course forward. And then let's use our experimental methods to determine if that's actually true or not. So that's kind of where I think we're trying to get to today. The
Selena did her
objective
homework.
versus subjective part is important, right? Like in science, we want to be as objective as possible. And I think in behavior in particular, there is a really high ability to have a lot of emotion involved, right? Like nobody likes being the target of interfering behavior, meaning nobody wants to get hit or kicked or spit on or have to chase a kid or have to, be sneezed on. I mean, sometimes behavior is accidental as well, but the reality is we don't like to be on the receiving end of those behaviors that we don't particularly enjoy. And so it can get really emotional. And so if we can try to be as objective as possible, it's going to be more beneficial and more effective as we try to move towards a solution to whatever the problem is.
Eloquently stated.
I appreciate that. I think there's another important piece built in here in that sometimes with behavior, with the science of behavior, what we're really trying to get at is the purpose or the function. Because once we know the function of behavior, then we can match interventions that are effective. And it's kind of this idea that we talk about in a lot of fields of science, of the difference between causation and correlation, right? Sometimes things happen around the same time and we think that they're related. And sometimes they are, and sometimes they aren't. And so if we can really get to kind of that root cause, to try to ensure that we know, okay, to the best of our ability and the best of our knowledge, this is why we think this is happening. Well, if this is why we think this is happening, then what are we going to do to solve that problem? Or what are we going to do to try to alleviate what's going on? Does that make sense? Or other thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think from a behavior standpoint and thinking about being in school, so much of that figuring it out happens in real time in that we try an intervention, we see if there's things in place, right? There's all kinds of contingencies and environmental factors that could, may, or don't contribute to the behavior, whether it's productive behavior, it's interfering behavior, whatever. But when we start manipulating some of those to try to get a change in a student's behavior, that's kind of how we figure out why the student might be engaging in a challenging behavior, because we have to make those changes to the environment in real time and see how it plays with the rest of the environment, how it plays with the rest of sort of what's going on around the student, which is often not within our control. And so it's really can be challenging to really sort of isolate a lot of those things if we're doing a functional behavior assessment, for instance, in a classroom of 30, 20 kids, right? There's a lot we can't control. And so it's one of those things where we have to do it, see if it works, try it again, do it, see if it works, make a change, do it, see if it works. You know what I mean? It's one of these like real time.
So then how do we know if it works though? Because I think that's the other part of the science that's really important.
Well, so I think part of that is looking at those variables that Daniel is talking about, right? And naming them and trying to isolate them when possible to try to identify what a relationship between which things. Because I agree that realistically, when we do this in the classroom, there are so many variables that we can't control necessarily, but we can at least try to figure out how can we manipulate, how can we remove some of them if possible at all, right? How do we look and identify and measure and test the dependent and independent variable like relationship, which is, depending on your setting and depending on your context, may be a pretty tricky thing to do.
It absolutely can be, but I also think there are really simple things that we can do in the classroom that can make a really big difference. And one of the things we haven't really talked about is the data collection, right? If we're not collecting data, then we're not really making educated decisions. We're kind of taking a shot in the dark, essentially. And when you're the one, correct me if you all don't feel this way, but when I'm in the middle of dealing with students who are having crisis behavior, it's actually really hard to be objective and it's really hard to know like has this been going on for 10 minutes or like an hour? And I look at my watch and time doesn't seem to pass in the same way. Or like, holy cow, this kid has been screaming a lot, but really when I take data, it's only like 10 times, but gosh, it feels like it's been a lot more. And I think our data keep us grounded in that objectiveness rather than veering into that emotional. And I don't want to say that it's bad to have emotion around behavior, and we do, that is reality. But if we want to be effective in changing it, we need to try to be as analytical as we can so that we can make good objective decisions rather than decisions based on those emotions. So anyway, data collection, which is really the point of what I was talking about. Why do we really need data collection? Why is that so important?
Well, I think you brought that up, and I started thinking around kind of the expectations we have for classroom teachers and the the varying responsibilities they have. And I think um, coming from and sort of starting my career in an environment where we took data on a lot of things most all the time, um, there was a lot of value in growing as a professional in that I understood different data collection methods. I understood the value of why I would need to know the rate of a behavior, right? Or um, so that I can make programmatic and intervention changes, right? To meet the needs of the student as quickly as possible. Um, when we and so I think that having that background and understanding sort of the objectivity of behavior and how to sort of think about it um, critically, objectively, whatever, has helped me then think that way at any other time. And so when there's behaviors that you don't necessarily need to collect data on, maybe it's a minor disruption in the classroom. We're starting to see a kid who's leaving his seat a little more often than you might, that teachers just sort of intuitively pick up. Um, they may not write it down, they may not capture it, but being able to think functionally around why do I like what's happening right before, what's happening right after might lead us to, well, this kid just needs some attention. If I walk by his desk every 4 minutes, then he won't get out of his desk. He'll get his work done and everybody's happy and we're all successful, right? So it's almost like this is my own perspective. Learning this really structured and sort of developing my skills in a really structured way has allowed me to think that way kind of all the time in a classroom and thinking about like why things might be happening because I have sort of that history of collecting data all the time. Does that make any sense?
So I think Daniel, yes, I think it's jumping to, like how do we do it and all those things. I think for me, I have to have data in order to justify a lot of my decisions and in order to know where it is that I'm going and to see if the interventions that I'm trying to implement with kiddos or adults in the buildings are working, right? Because I really don't know what the present level of performance, anybody's performance is without the data collection. And then sometimes with some of our interventions, particularly when that progress is gradual, without measuring, I don't know if things are working or not, or if I need to do something different, or if it's working fast enough. And Selena, I appreciate the point about, things needing to be objective and making decisions kind of with our brain more so than with our emotion. I think this is why data becomes so important when we're talking about behaviors because I think it's really hard to tease those two processes out, right? I mean, we all joke about how much experience we have in the schools and in a variety of roles. But I mean, even now, if I'm in the classroom and a kiddo yells at me, I have an emotional reaction. I mean, I manage it, right? I certainly know how to have my coping strategies and all those things. But because we are people dealing with people's behaviors, it's really easy to let emotions kind of color the experience. And without the data collection, it's kind of to that point where if I am a teacher in the classroom and I have a student who engages in the behavior that I find really troublesome, right? Whether it is screaming or whether it is putting hands on other kids, whatever it might be, I might feel like this happens all day long, every day. But when we take data, it might be that, yes, it happens for a solid hour and a half, but there's a difference between an hour and a half and 6 hours of a day, right?
I,
And
I agree
so,
with you. And I think, sorry, and I think a big part of it, and this is where I talk about the emotion too, I think we get overwhelmed by kind of, because when we're the ones who are doing the intervention and we're the ones collecting data and we're the ones who, doing all the pieces, when we have a kid who has, pretty either like they are engaging in these interfering behaviors a lot or like for really long periods of time, as we put interventions in place and we start to see a decrease, sometimes we don't necessarily feel that decrease right away. I used to work with this little preschooler who I loved. He was adorable. And then he would scream at such a pitch that my eardrums would like vibrate. He just hit this exact right pitch when he screamed, and he knew it, and he was very good at it. And, when I first started working with him, he was screaming over 200 times a day. Like it was almost impossible to keep the data because the screaming was just almost all the time. And so as we put interventions in place and we started seeing improvement, his screaming went down to like 50 times a day, which in number wise is a vast improvement. But when we're still talking about a behavior that is so aversive to a lot of people in the environment, like emotionally, it's still like, but he's still screaming a lot. He is, but let's look at our data because we've seen a dramatic decrease in that screaming behavior. So what we're doing is successful. We've got to stay the course. And I think when we're doing interventions, particularly when we don't see the immediate improvement or the immediate like that behavior is gone, sometimes it's really hard to stick with our interventions if we don't have data to show that what we're doing is actually making a difference.
well, and I think to that point, right? I think about my days in the classroom. I think about my days at work, just in general. I mean, we are wired to have a bit of that negativity bias, where the things that don't go well for many of us have a tendency to really resonate and feel much bigger than they are if you look at the data and if you have the data to support it, right? So I could have a really effective intervention going on, let's say for the same little baby, like you mentioned, Selena, right? And we might be improving greatly, but if I had those high pitched screaming a couple of times, I still might feel like nothing is working, to your
Right.
point, until I look at the data, right? And so I think that, yes, there is the whole subjectivity creeps into it. Yes, I think we need data to actually inform our decisions and to evaluate whether our interventions are working well or not. And I think depending on who we are and what our positionality to the world is, it helps us stay a little bit more grounded, right? Because some of the experiences might color the data to a different shade in our eyes, unless we're looking at it in a very strategic manner.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's really key to the science of behavior is sometimes when we see interfering behavior, we just naturally and normally want it to stop, right? I mean, this is whether you're working in a school with your own children, public, and you see kids doing stuff, you're like, just please stop. And so whatever we need to do to make that stop, we tend to do. Instead, when we really are talking about practicing the science of behavior, what we're really focusing on is trying to identify this is the specific behavior of concern. This is the root cause, or at least as near as we can tell, the function of that behavior. And then this is the intervention that we're going to match with that, rather than just kind of throwing things, throwing in the kitchen sink, and then we don't know what actually worked or didn't work. And then we have to keep up these really high levels, or worse, we just stop doing everything, and then lo and behold, the behavior comes back. And so I think it's that systematic process that we need to go through.
I think the other piece to that, and I just want really our listeners to remember that too, right? Is that this is applicable not just to interfering behavior. I mean,
Absolutely.
hopefully, we are trying to increase all the really awesome behaviors that the kids are engaging in, and I think we need to look at some of the data collection there as well to figure out, are the strategies improving practices? Are the kids exhibiting what we want them to do? So I know we talk about, and I know most of our examples come from the kind of world of interfering behaviors because those are the ones that have a tendency to disrupt instruction. But I also think that it would behoove us to look at data collection and to think about signs of behavior, how to increase the positive behaviors that kiddos are engaging in as well. So just wanted to balance the conversation a little bit with that part.
No, I appreciate that. I think the other thing that's really important is the science of behavior is a science. This is a field of study. And so there is a lot of research that supports this and backs this. And it doesn't just work with kids with disabilities. It doesn't just work with kids. It works with adults. It works with your spouse. It works with your own children. It works with your pets. It works with, everybody. And so these rules of behavior, principles of behavior, they are widely applicable. They are not just this works for this one kid, but it didn't work for anybody else.
And I think this is why I'm really excited about the upcoming episodes of our own podcast, a shameless marketing ploy over here, because the science of behavior is pretty vast, right? I mean, even us talking about looking at different aspects of experimental design and data collection piece and different variables and compounding variables and all of that. And I know it can feel really overwhelming if you're just kind of joining in and listening listening in at the beginning of this. But I'm excited that we'll have the opportunity to take some of those pieces and unpack them and translate them into, so how do you collect data in a classroom where you have 30 lovely bodies to account for teaching a content area that is tested on a statewide assessment? And how do you also at the same time collect data for a couple of your kiddos or one particular child? So I think it's important to remember that, yes, overall as a field, it has a plethora of information and some really fun complexity to it. But in narrowing it down, we are definitely gonna hopefully help you along on that journey.
Yeah, and actually, as in the aim of shameless plugs, although not so shameless, I think it is time for our commercial of the day. As a reminder, these are totally not sponsored, not paid for. They're just things that we think are helpful, interesting, cool that we wanted to share. So, Daniel, I think you have our commercial today.
I do. I wanted to throw something in at the end of that conversation. And Selena, you mentioned
Please.
adult behavior, and it I think when we look at schools and we think about making changes to student behavior, we really have to consider, we really have to focus on the adult behavior, whether that's our own behavior or the people around the student, right? And so these principles apply there as well, whether you're kind of monitoring yourself or you're monitoring and coaching someone else, these principles of behavior, and we will talk about it as this continues to go, will be a key in making the changes that need to happen in an environment to help a student overcome some of those challenges. So that said, today's advertisement is for Magic School. Magic School is a website. It's magicschool.ai. It is an AI warehouse of tools that teachers can use to create and modify all kinds of instructional and classroom activities. And so I think there's like close to 90 different things you can do in there. I'll share just a couple real quick. The first one I pulled up is a presentation generator. And I asked it, what is science? And let's make this for a fifth grade group. And it gave me 5 slides and an activity that I could put in there, right? Awesome. The other is tongue twisters. I don't know why they have a tongue twister thing, but I opened it just to sort of see what was what. And I put in the prompt for a 12th grade level, give me tongue twisters for behavioral science. Okay. So the first one is behavioral biases breed baffling beliefs. We should do these to warm up for this thing. Cognitive cues create curious conclusions. Perceptual patterns perplex passionate psychologists. There's one I really like. Hold on. Motivational myths muddle meaningful messages. Motivational myths muddle meaningful message. Okay.
All right, back to our pop culture. All I can hear in my head right now is Ron Burgundy. Just putting that out there.
The other was make it relevant. So thinking about student motivation and things of that nature, I put in a very simple prompt. Fourth grade, we're doing long division, 4-digit numbers divided by 2-digit numbers. The student, and then it gives me a place to write, like, describe your students. They love video games, Nikes, and playing the guitar. That's my kid, by the way. And then it generates some math problems for how I could word problems, connecting to their interests, things of that nature. The last one, because I know for many students, reading can be a challenge. A lot of times when I'm in classrooms, I see that some of those academic things are often precursors to some challenging behavior in the classroom, right? So one of my friends at T-Tech showed me this the other day. She took the first paragraph of A Tale of Two Cities and put it into their text leveler and put it at a second grade level. And so if we have time, I shall read to you the first paragraph of The Tale of Two Cities at a second grade level. It was a good time and it was a bad time. People were smart and some people were not so smart. Some people believed in things while others did not. There was light, there was darkness. It was a time when people felt happy and hopeful, but it was also a time when people felt sad and worried. So helpful for me, helpful for a number, but just the amount of time that could be saved kind of looking at some of these tools. They do have some tools that I wouldn't necessarily strongly recommend. They have a BIP generator, they have an IEP generator, and so I think using a lot of caution and thinking about that, how you use these tools. But there's so many really wonderful tools that you can use for lesson planning and resource development and that kind of thing. Magic
Nice.
School.
Nice. We will link that in the show notes. Always a caution with AI is to go back and make sure that it actually produce what you wanted it to produce and that it fits your needs and that it's accurate. I
I will
also
say it does have a few safeguards. My other colleague Kelly put in a prompt about like butt jokes for second graders, and it said this is not appropriate content for second graders. So
I'm
again,
glad somebody tried it out.
not a stop all. It's not going to fix everything, but maybe just, there's a few guardrails in place.
So I do want to say that I love all the really cool things that AI can do. So totally stand behind this recommendation. And I echo Selena's invitation for folks to review it through a kind of critical lens. I would also encourage folks to make sure that not only is it accurate information and it is what you want to portray, I also would encourage folks to just make sure it is still culturally responsive, because sometimes AI is still learning how to be really kind and inclusive. So, on that note, I think it is just as any tool that we will be sharing, right, is use it with caution. Make sure that you're using your scientific analytical mind as well to just know that that it is serving your needs in the way that you want them to.
Perfect. A good wrap up. Always be kind and critical and do the right thing. So I think that's good. I think this brings us to our end today. So thank you to Daria and Daniel and Emily for being with us. And thanks to our listeners. And we will see you on our next episode.
Thanks for listening to Education Insights Focus on Behavior. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can join the conversation by emailing us at cbis@odu.edu, visiting www.cbisva.org, or following us on Facebook, Instagram, X, or Blue Sky at CBISVA. Special thanks to the Virginia Department of Education for their support of this project.